All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Glad to have everyone for this webinar, the end of October 2021. And today we have two speakers talking about networking in faculty roles. Dr. Shannon Norris and Lacey Roberts from New Mexico State University will lead us in this discussion today. Following, there'll be some time if folks have any announcements or updates going on at their universities that they'd like to share with everybody. And Shannon and Lacey, I'll let you decide how you would like to take questions or comments throughout. But given the changing demographic and everything going on in agriculture communications as far as curriculum and faculty roles go, with so many new programs starting up around the country, I'm very interested to see what you have to talk about today, looking at how faculty roles may be needing to change, possibly in terms of networking there. So Shannon, Lacey, turn it over to you.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Telg, and thank you for the chance to get to hang out with you all for 50 minutes today. We know that we've got a few other people who might come in a little bit later, but just thank you all for being here. We're excited to talk about networking and faculty roles and highlight some key tricks that we've learned along the way. A little bit about my background. I grew up in the southwestern corner of New Mexico and studied in New Mexico State, Oklahoma State, and Texas A&M through all of my graduate work. And now I'm able to be back in my alma mater, which is really exciting, teaching agricultural communications. And my research focus is in helping people understand agriculture in various different contexts. And so that comes to life for me working with the Department of Defense and some of our areas of conflict as it relates to agriculture assessment in conflict areas. So very excited to get to talk about networking with you today.
Yes, and I am Dr. Lacey Roberts. So I grew up in the Panhandle of Texas, kind of jumped around for school. So I went to West Texas A&M University for my undergrad. Then I went to Oklahoma State University at a different time than Shannon, studied international agriculture, and then went to Texas A&M at the same time with Shannon. And so we got to work together at that point. And then I went to Mississippi State and started teaching there. And now I am here at New Mexico State University in ag communications, looking at the visual side of what we do in communications. And also that kind of carries into my research interests. So looking at how do we visually communicate agriculture? How do people take in and perceive images? And specifically, how do we do that when we talk about international agriculture development? How do we showcase that in images? So as we get started here today, I think that one of the biggest things that we should kind of address head on is like, why networking? Sometimes when we talk about networking, we hear the word and some of us might just kind of shuffle it to the back of our mind. We think of it as something that happens on the day-to-day. But we also wanted to acknowledge that there are many reasons for networking. And in the past research, a study actually asked faculty in business schools, what are the various reasons, right? And they really wanted to populate some of those reasons. And so as they started to indicate that, they said that most of the time they're looking for writing, looking for co-authors, whether it is writing for research or in a next bubble is grants and funding. So we're looking for co-authors and people to help us in the way that we try to achieve our research goals. The other one is actually looking for ways to meet those interdisciplinary goals that are set forth by universities and funding agencies. Another is mentorship. And this is something that is very common as young faculty. We're trying to find people that can guide us and mentor us through this stage. The other is friendship. They just want to build this environment that makes it nice and fun to work with and that you enjoy, being in the job that you're in. And finally, one of the groups was actually just trying to connect with people that are influencers and people that make differences in the industry. So all of these together come to form what we gain the idea about networking. And so we wanted to understand that each of you may have a different reason of why you're networking. Personally, for me, being in 2 institutions within 2 years, I'm looking for that mentorship and that friendship. I'm needing to build new contacts and kind of get settled as I'm in a new space. And then eventually that will shift to writing and grants and other pieces. So our networking is something that ebbs and flows and it grows as we do. So we wanted to address that as we started this conversation.
And I think that that leads us into the context of what we mean whenever we say networking, because all of us might define this term differently than others would. And because we're calm people, I think that it's important to say sometimes we refer to networking as a verb, and sometimes network is referred to as a noun. And in this situation, we're adopting it as a mindset and an action. So thinking through how can we strengthen our circle of people that are around us, our context of people that are around us, depending on whatever level we are at within our institutions or potentially in our organizations. And networking requires a two-way effort. And the key part of this is we want it to be intentional, of wanting to give into those networks rather than just receive. Because a lot of times a common myth with networking is saying that maybe we went to a research conference, we met some really great people in the lunch line, built a connection with that individual. But that doesn't really make it a network. That makes it a really great conversation. The network is whenever there's two-way steps to that, and we're able to move the needle forward with some of those goals that Lacey addressed earlier. So what is networking and what does it mean for you? And I think that having that kind of front of mind as we go through the next set of slides might be helpful for being able to move the needle at your institution or your organization with how we can refine a two-way conversation with people that we surround ourselves with.
So when we talk about networking, right, there's a lot of areas that have different value for us. And as faculty members, for us and what we do, we kind of identify these different pieces of our network. And so one of them is research in funding and priorities. So I mentioned it in the beginning, but NSF released in 2016 their 10 big ideas. And in that, one of them was growing convergent research. And the big part of that was a primary characteristic of that was deep integration across disciplines. So when we think about a network and how we value that, it shows up in a lot of cases when we're trying to come up with innovative research ideas, but also to seek out that funding and be, competitive in that field. It's great to have a network that you can rely on to build programs and research ideas that are across disciplines or across universities. Also, when we think about value, we think about rigorous teaching, right? We have to rely on our network to bring experts into our classrooms and in a learning environment. Because when we're building a curriculum, it's great to consider areas and opportunities that we can focus on to bring in those industry leaders that are coming into contact with our students, and we can consider what is changing in the landscape of agriculture communications and how can our network help keep our information up to date. It also shows up in our promotion and tenure perspectives, right? As we are thinking about how our network can assist in exposing us to different perspectives that are held by colleagues and mentors and industry leaders. We can use established relationships to encourage and to guide us as we maneuver the field of academia and promotion and tenure. And finally, one of the largest value areas of networking can be in how we incorporate our communities into the work that we do with service and extension. So universities serve in a very unique role in connecting research to people who serve communities. So essentially the boots on the ground individuals, the people who are implementing new practices and new ideas on the day-to-day. So our role, if we are tapping into our network, we nurture those relationships where we can provide information to people who essentially see the community and people in the industry sometimes more than we do. So as we stoke this idea of networking and nurturing those relationships, we can see that some of our key values are showing up in these areas. So one way that we are working into our building of the curriculum and thinking about our network and utilizing our network as we are a new program is in building a close connection with industry leaders to help keep our curriculum relevant. So we have close connections with New Mexico Department of Agriculture. So for instance, a public information officer has helped inform some of the writing objectives in the classes that we have here in New Mexico State. Also, as we're looking at the objectives and the outcomes that we're writing into our syllabi and our curriculum for courses, we're writing them according to the needs that we've heard from industry partners, people that are around us saying, hey, this is what we're needing out of our students and the skill sets that are built in the classroom. We can see it in the partnerships that are building with internships. So we have students that are in New Mexico Farm Bureau, and they are doing active work, working in building communication pieces that are showcasing the true agriculture influence in New Mexico State. And then also we're actually getting to have students reach out to alumni themselves and to reach out to influential industry leaders that they can learn from them themselves. So we are creating space where students are actively seeking out and building their own network. And for instance, that's in our Sam Still seminar series. So we're bringing in influential people that can showcase, what it looks like out there on the day-to-day, and it's actively feeding into what we're doing in our classrooms. So today, as we talked about networking, Shannon and I realized that we're in the beginning stages of our network. We're just getting started in our career, actually, as I should say. And so we reflected upon how we're using our networks, and we really wanted to hear from a variety of individuals because we are at a certain stage in our career. And so we wanted to hear from different individuals and gain their perspectives. And we identified 6 levels of positions that are common in our field. And we asked these people to speak on the different networking challenges that are faced in their position and at their specific level, and also share any advice that they received. So today you'll hear from Rebecca McCarty. She is a master's graduate student from New Mexico State University. Jean Perella, a doctoral graduate student from Texas A&M University. Levy Randolph, an assistant professor at Kansas State University. You'll hear from Annie Specht, an associate professor at The Ohio State University. Ricky Telg, a professor at the University of Florida. And also Alexa Major Wilcox, who is the executive director of Field of Hope and somebody that we identified as a practitioner in our field.
As these videos are playing, one of the things that might be helpful for us is to consider what are some of the challenges that you face within your existing level. So recognizing that our audience, we've got people all the way from the professor level to first-year master's students, and those challenges and its successes and pieces of advice are different for all these different levels. So we just asked, as we're watching these videos, maybe reflect on some of the things that are pertinent to you and your network. So maybe some of their nuggets can be something that we can take away beyond this conference. So let's check it out. We'll start first with our master's student, Rebecca McCarty.
One of the greatest challenges I have faced as a graduate student in building a network is simply having access to the opportunities to network. I think COVID did a really good job of showing us how versatile we are in being able to shift things to online platforms and find new ways to create opportunities to still do the things that we were doing before the pandemic. However, I also think that COVID really presented a challenge to young professionals because we had to learn how to make connections behind a computer screen, which is pretty challenging. I think that one of the biggest ways that we learned to overcome this was being more intentional with the way that we were trying to connect with people, even if it was behind a computer screen. I also think it made us more willing to pursue opportunities that we maybe wouldn't have in a different year, simply by being willing to network over various media platforms and just building the courage to put ourselves out there and say, this is who I am and this is why I'm interested in being here. I also think it really required people my age to rely on the connections of our professors or other people that were in our inner circle for initial contact with other people, as well as just relying on the people that are in our circle as a source of knowledge or as a resource for whatever it is that we were trying to accomplish. I think if I had one piece of advice for people trying to build a network in my age range, I would rely on the advice that I got from one of my mentors right before I started college. So one of my really good mentors told a group of friends and I that one of the key parts to our success in college would be our willingness to connect with our professors. And she told us that the easiest way to do this was to walk up to the front of the classroom on the first day of class, shake the professor's hand, and make sure that they knew who we were. And really, I think that practicing this advice is really what got me where I am today. Being able to not only be recognized by my professors, but also build a personal relationship is really what has gotten me into all of the places that I am today, whether it's grad school or my career or any other opportunities that I face. And it doesn't only apply to the classroom. I've also learned that it has incredible value in professional circles when you're willing to walk to the front of a conference room and say, "Hi, this is who I am. Thanks for presenting. I really enjoyed it." It also gives you a great opportunity not only to meet the person who was presenting, but also to meet other people who are willing to stand at the front of the room to meet that person. And it really is just a simple step that expands your circle and really helps you build that network, even in virtual settings.
Rebecca McCarty is one of our outstanding graduate students. We're very lucky to have her. Now we'll listen to Jean Perella. She's a doctoral student at Texas A&M University.
Hi there, my name is Jean Perella, and I am in the second year of my doctoral program in the Department of Agricultural Leadership, Education, and Communications at Texas A&M University. The biggest challenge I face with networking as a doctoral student is maintaining consistent relationships with faculty, graduate students, and other professionals in my discipline beyond my department. When I'm around these people, say at a conference, I feel like I'm able to network effectively and have those important conversations, but that occurs maybe once, twice a year. And to establish a lasting network, I think it takes more than that. So it's difficult for me to connect with these individuals more consistently and really establish those stronger, more meaningful professional relationships. I've received excellent advice about how to make the most out of the networking process. What's worked well for me is spending time researching individuals I want to network with. I find out where they went to school, determine what subjects they teach, and identify which research methodologies they are an expert in. And then I find common ground with them based on those things. I ask them specific questions about their area of expertise that interest me, and then explain to them why I'm inquiring about that particular topic and how learning from them will help me develop my professional and academic skill set. I found that faculty are always more than willing to help graduate students. And also, just like any expert, they enjoy talking about their expertise. So this strategy from my experience has led to enjoyable and productive conversations. I have also been told to keep several business cards on me at all times, even if I'm not necessarily expecting a networking opportunity to present itself. And this advice has also come in very handy.
Jean is almost a doctoral candidate, so she is going into that process, which is incredible. So we'll have to watch for Jean in the next couple of years. Next, we'll listen to Levy Randolph. He's an assistant professor at Kansas State University.
Hi, everyone. Shannon asked me to respond to a couple of questions that she had asked. The first one being, what are some challenges I'm facing in my current position when it comes to networking? I think really the biggest challenge right now as an early faculty member in my third year has really been the last 2 years. I started in the fall of 2019, and come spring of 2020 when COVID hit and everything was on lockdown, that's essentially almost 2 years of not having those in-person opportunities to build networks. And while there were virtual conferences and opportunities for us to engage, I think it's a little different for me as someone who likes to interact with people in person. And so now it's kind of, as things are ramping back up, hopefully to be in a good spot, it's like playing catch up and wanting to interact and network with as many people as possible, but knowing that there's a clock as well for the tenure track. How do we navigate that time of networking with people in academia, people in the private industry, and ensuring that I'm building mutual relationships that I can provide services or help or volunteer for them, but at the same time, maybe there's a way that they can help with grant applications or research projects that I can still work that angle as well to make sure I set myself up for success, but also help them with whatever it is that they need to do. So thinking about that mutual beneficial relationship is really important. But the last 2 years of COVID and distance interaction has really been the biggest challenge. When it comes to advice, networking, just do it. Even if it's feeling uncomfortable or we may not know how to navigate that conversation or what might come of it, just engage, jump in, and have those conversations to begin the process, because you never know what might come of it. And then also make sure that you are protective of your network, meaning that if they need something, do your best to help them, and don't be afraid to lean on your network as well, because it's a give and take, and you want it to be that mutual beneficial relationship.
I think Levy is one of the best networkers that I've ever really had a chance to get to witness. So we thank him for his time at the assistant professor level. Now we'll get to listen to Annie Specht. She's an associate professor at The Ohio State University.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Annie Specht, an associate professor of agricultural communication at The Ohio State University. So some challenges that I face networking at the associate professor level really focus on the idea that most of the institutional support for networking and the institutional opportunities for networking are really targeted to assistant professors and those who are just beginning their scholarly careers. So at the university, we don't really have that many opportunities for getting together, sharing research ideas that are targeted to that particular level, because really the idea is that we want to make sure that assistant professors, postdocs, grad students are getting off on the right foot. But man, once you hit that associate professor level, it's sort of like you cease to exist when it comes to networking opportunities. So when I think about things that you can do to sort of help alleviate those barriers, I think the really big thing to remember is that quality is going to trump quantity every single time. So seeking out those networking opportunities where you'll have an opportunity to get face time with other faculty and researchers, making sure that you're choosing wisely sort of the audiences that you're going to meet with, and then sort of preparing kind of a plan of attack for when you're going to actually be encountering other people. One of the best pieces of advice I got was really be prepared with an elevator pitch about the type of work that you're doing, because that's going to make it a lot easier to explain in a relatively short amount of time what it is that you do and what you can offer. So again, it can be a little bit challenging when you're dealing with mid-career lulls and networking opportunities, but making sure that you identify those really high quality networking events and, go into those events with a plan of how you want to approach other people. That's really going to make all the difference when it comes to finding teams and finding folks to work with. So thank you for the opportunity to share.
Such a great perspective with time management being a challenge to the network. And Dr. Telg actually expands on that here at the professor level, Dr. Telg being from the University of Florida.
Shannon asked me to answer a couple of questions related to networking. The first one is, what are current challenges you face with networking at your career level? I guess the first one, of course, is time, making sure that we carve out time to network. It's very important at all levels of career, from assistant professor all the way up to full professor. And then for me at the full professor level, one of the challenges is making sure I can network and do network with not only folks at the assistant and associate professor level, but also at the full professor level. So identifying those individuals who are at my career level too, and as well as professionals, making sure that I work with and network with individuals who represent the private industry too, is also very important. The second question is, what advice have you received or seen modeled well in networking? I guess it goes back to going back in person conferences. Breakfasts are a really good time to try to network. Usually there's not a guest speaker at the breakfast, so use that time to network with others. Also, a little hint, when there's a session that you aren't really all that keen to go to, and you find someone else who's kind of in that same boat, use that time constructively and network, because as we know at conferences, it's sometimes difficult to find time where everyone can get together to network. So use time wisely when you go to conferences, and then also to reach out to individuals who you might read about in academic journals, and just connect that way as well.
Dr. Telg, whenever I watched this video the first time, I was taking some notes on the side of like, my gosh, we need to do that. So Dr. Telg, thank you for that. Our final video and perspective is Alexa Major Wilcox. She is a practitioner, and like Lacey mentioned earlier, she's the executive director of Field of Hope, bringing an industry perspective for today.
Hi, my name is Alexa Major Wilcox, and I'm the executive director for Field of Hope, an international organization dedicated to agricultural development. Today, I'm here to talk to you about networking. One of the challenges I face with networking, being so young in my career, is knowing where to even begin. What associations should I be a part of? What meetings should I be tuning into? And where should I go to look for those working in the same spaces as I am? Another challenge that I find is securing the invitation into those spaces. Once I've identified the groups of people I would like to work with, or the associations that I would like to work with, or even the universities that I would like to work with, it is hard sometimes to extend a cold invitation, and that isn't always well received. Being a relatively young organization and being new in my career myself, it is hard when you don't have other relationships to bank those invitations on or to ask to make those introductions. One of the best pieces of advice that I've received as far as networking goes is along the same lines of the age-old adage, you can learn something from everyone. That is also true in networking. Not only can you learn something from everyone, but there may be a connection with anyone and everyone that you meet. It might not be apparent immediately how you can partner with that connection or that networking individual, but if you wait and take notes and make sure that you establish a great relationship with them, you may find that in 1 year's time, 3 years' time, or even 5 years' time, your work will circle back around and you can include them or partner with them on a future project. Another piece of advice that I have is to be shameless about utilizing the network you do have. So many of us may have one mentor or one other individual within the space that has a great network themselves. And I think more often than I even consider, they're willing to share those contacts. So if you have a question or a problem and are looking for someone to help you brainstorm a solution, I'd first reach out to those members within your network that already exist and ask them to make an introduction or to shed some light on some areas or groups of people that can help you solve that problem. The final piece of advice I have is to remember that networking is reciprocal. Too often, I feel like we go into these networking situations thinking only of what we can gain personally or professionally. And instead, we need to approach these situations thinking about what we have to offer as far as opportunities or partnerships go for others. I find that if you walk into a relationship, a networking relationship, and you may not know that person or they may not know who you are or what you do. If you walk into that situation with something to give and something to offer them, they're way more willing to receive your contact information and partner in the future. I just encourage you to, before you enter this networking space, to really evaluate what opportunities you have to offer others as far as networking goes and in ways that you can help them advance their objectives. And I think you'll find that networking ends up being a much more positive experience for you. Thank you so much. I hope this is a great project and thanks for listening.
Alexa is fantastic. If you haven't had a chance to interact with her, we strongly recommend that. As we move into kind of the next section, again, we just want to reinforce that whenever we started the conversation about networking, Lacey and I kind of checked in with ourselves and we were like, how are people going to want to listen to two assistant professors talk about the value and how great we are at networking? And so we wanted to be able to make sure that we were learning from the best of the best at multiple different levels. So thank you to all of those that helped provide perspectives. And that helps reinforce some of the direction that we're headed in as we wrap up kind of our conversation and presentation today, is that every single person at all levels of careers, all levels and positions, require other people to be successful, especially in communication spaces. And so recognizing that because each of us are at different levels, there might be different nuggets and different pieces that we can add to our toolboxes that might be more pertinent to others. And so hopeful that we can add to our tips and tricks to networking based on the conversation that we just heard from our other professionals. So with that, two kind of concepts of toolbox elements, things that could be helpful for us as we're moving on, regardless of the level that we're in, is one is a networking mindset. And then the second part is going to be some toolbox pieces to add to our networking mechanics. So first, getting our head into the right space. The first one here is whenever we have or approach a conversation, and maybe it's a cold conversation, we've never met that individual before, and we want to be able to leave a lasting impression. So the first one is we want to make sure that we're leaving a memorable and a meaningful connection, especially if it's something where we know that we provide value to them and they might be able to help our areas or our careers move forward as well. Sometimes we don't know those individuals, right? And sometimes it's the brief conversation and then we didn't realize that that was a friend or a connection that we just made. But the cool thing about a memorable and meaningful connection is we've got to approach it with a service-minded approach. And I feel like this is a little backwards from what a lot of the training that I've personally been a part of as an assistant professor on the value of networking, because all of us have the limitations of time, right? Everything that we have is demanding of our time. And a lot of times we might not have the ability to say yes to certain things. And if we're able to provide a strong perspective where both sides benefit from the relationship, it's going to be a stronger network and a stronger relationship that down the road, that connection could be beneficial for us. And so simple mindset switch, still knowing when to own your yes, like we heard in a previous session for SACs earlier, own your yes, but also know what it is that you bring to the table and knowing that there might be two-way value that's provided down the road. Number 3 is relationships are based on touch points. And so wanting to be able to reinforce that it might not just be that conversation in the hallway at a research conference that lands a networking relationship where now you have a partner in a different grant, but being able to have a follow-up with those individuals where there's value on both sides of the street there. So follow-up is key, being able to maintain those touch points and relationships. And on the next slide in mechanics, we'll share a cool tool that might be helpful for that. And then finally, networking mindset. It's much easier to be interested rather than interesting. And so if we're at a brand new situation, we maybe don't know anybody at that particular conference or in that scenario, being able to ask open-ended questions and be more interested in allowing them to talk about their expertise shows that there's interest in there and it reinforces a stronger relationship with those people beyond that location. And that lands us into the networking mechanics, recognizing again, some of us are at various levels in our careers where we're already kind of at the pinnacle of our career. Some of us are brand new graduate students. So some of these might resonate more with individuals rather than others. But these are some of the basics that I think regardless of your level, they're going to provide some value for us. So when possible, do our research. So know who those people are. If you're at a research conference, like Dr. Telg said in his video, look up those individuals that might be writing some of the similar things that you're interested in those academic journals, and make a plan to try to connect with those people because they might be able to share a similar research interest area. At a conference, if you're able to identify 2 to 3 people that you would like to connect with, that gives you a little bit of a plan in place before you go into there where you know a little bit about those individuals and their backgrounds. Recognizing that this might not always be the case, but when possible, do our research. Number 2 is push ourselves outside of our comfort zones. One of the number 1 barriers to a strong network that we've identified in some of the research prior to this session is that people feel awkward going up to someone and having a brief conversation. Social anxiety is one of the number 1 barriers to being able to approach a conversation. But whenever we recognize that other people are feeling the same, they're feeling just as awkward likely as we are, it probably makes them feel better that someone is coming up to them. So when possible, push ourselves outside of our comfort zone and approach with confidence, knowing that that person probably wants to talk to you just as much as you do. So have that confidence in being able to approach. For graduate students, sometimes it's easier if you've got a wing person, right? Somebody that's able to go up with you to kind of bounce some of those conversations off. But we can also get stuck in that space, especially at the dinners and the meals, where sometimes we're just sitting with our own personal existing circle, and we've got to challenge ourselves to push outside of that. So maybe choose 1 or 2 meals in that conference where if it feels really uncomfortable, just sit at a different table where you don't know anybody and force yourself to learn those people. You might be surprised by how cool our organizations and our networking circles are. The third bullet, ask open-ended questions. This highlights back to our conversation that we said a second ago, where it's easier to be interested than it is to be interesting. So a lot of times we get into the barrier, especially like if we're thinking elevator conversations with people where we're just making small talk just for the sake of eliminating the awkward silence in the elevator. And I don't know if anybody else has ever been guilty of that, but feel that. So in those moments, be able to ask open-ended questions that inspire their passion. Allow them to talk about their areas of interest and their areas of advice, because that might be the open door that we need to find where our connection exists. So open-ended questions, challenge ourselves to avoid the yes or no or the binary questions. COVID has also moved a lot of our landscapes. A lot of times it's not just in person. And so sometimes we've got to be able to establish those relationships via an email, which is more difficult than just walking up to someone and having a conversation. So if we're able to do some research online, find a connection point, something that we have in common, and be able to establish a connection and an interest in that email early, and then request an opportunity for a follow-up conversation. If those people don't have time, they'll tell you that. And likely that has nothing to do with you and everything to do with how crazy their schedule is, but at least they've seen your name in their inbox. And that's one of the touch point pieces, because then if you see that person at a conference, it's reinforcing, yeah, I remember that email. Let's have a brief conversation here at the conference. And so I think that that is reinforced with our confidence element as well. And then the final step here is a tip that we pulled out of this book here, which is Networking is a Contact Sport. Joe Sweeney is the author. I attended a professional development session for a group that I'm working with the United States Army. And Joe came in to lead our conversation with how do we build relationships in tough scenarios. And one of the things that he talked about was a 5, 10, and 15 rule. Now, Joe is probably known as one of the best networking individuals in modern day leadership development. And he recommended that once a day, if you can manage your schedule, there needs to be 5 verbal in-person touch points, 10 over the phone, and 15 written. So what that means is 5 intentional conversations to stop into an office with maybe one of your student workers, see how they're doing at that particular point and just check in. Beyond just the hallway, hey, how are you, right? He's saying that that's not enough. So 5 valuable in-person interactions. He said that there's got to be, that he recommends 10 phone calls. So phone calls to people that are beyond your network, that maybe they're people that you already have the phone numbers for, or maybe it's reinforced through the 15 written correspondence, which could be through email, could be through something that is a messenger on social media, or maybe it's some other way of connecting with that. But he recommends if you do this on the daily, you'll eventually find that you've got a really strong, profound network of individuals that when they know that your heart's in the service-minded location first, that you can call on for various different levels. Whenever I first heard this conversation though, I was like, Joe, man, that's a lot of time. I don't have time for that. I don't have time to have this network investment, especially if it doesn't have a high return. And his point directly to me was, if you don't have enough time to invest in finding that network, then you're not going to have enough time to reap the rewards of that network. And so maybe it's not as extreme for each one of us, but maybe there's an intentional push that we have where there's got to be a verbal face-to-face interaction, and you set the number with whatever makes sense for you. Some point of contact over the phone and some point of contact over an email. He recommends that that's going to build a robust set of people that are in your circle, that then we can find those multiple touch points. So Joe Sweeney, really cool networking guru. These are some of the other books that were highlighted in the top 8 most influential networking professional development books in 2021. So maybe they can provide a resource for you. All right. So as we find ourselves kind of at the mid part of getting ready to answer some questions, Dr. Roberts and I were like, well, it doesn't make sense to do a networking talk without the opportunity to talk to somebody else other than listening to ourselves. And so briefly, in a moment, you'll get an invitation to a breakout room. And this breakout room is just intended to, if we can do that. Dr. Telg, would you mind adding us as a co-host? Sorry about that.
Keep talking. Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so as we're doing that in a moment, hopefully we'll get an invitation to a breakout room. In that breakout room, our goal is just to meet those colleagues. Some of us might know those individuals, some of us might not. And in that conversation, we're going to seek a commonality and a connection with each person. So find something that we have in common. Maybe it's an interest that's related to our research agenda. Maybe it's something that is an interest in teaching, but some type of a connection and commonality. And then the challenge would be, maybe we write those down, and then maybe we follow up with those individuals to establish those multiple touch points. So looking at our time here, we have, let me get back. A breakout room. Look at that. Okay, here we go. We've got 141 on the agenda. We're going to spend about 4 to 5 minutes just having a conversation with people. And then we're going to come back in with those commonalities and those checkpoints to wrap up the session and answer any questions that we might have. So real briefly, you should get an invitation to that breakout room right now. All right, welcome back, crew. We've got one more room that's about to make it back in. All right, very good. So just briefly, how did the conversation with our peers or our other colleagues go in the breakout rooms?
I
Dr.
think
Myers, sorry, go ahead.
no worries. Dr. Mike here, Cal Poly University. I think we needed to talk a little bit more, and towards the end of our conversation is when we found the commonality in the disaster management interest that I have, and then Kelsey's University, she was talking about the similarities between the disasters in California and the disasters they have over there. And so it's a good teachable moment that sometimes networking takes a little more time than usual. And I'm interested to reconnect with her at some point.
I love that. That's such a good moment there, just to help us kind of like recap, and recognizing 4 minutes really isn't enough time to find the partner on that next $1 million grant, right? But those multiple touch points might be able to provide the future conversation that can get to that area. So thanks for addressing that. That's wonderful. Dr. Myers, I saw you shaking your hand here, and I appreciate that honesty. She logged out here, but I think that sometimes brief conversations like this just open the door for future connections and future points where we can follow up and create another touch point. And so as we wrap up and we get ready just to answer any questions that we might have, I hope that whatever level, whatever area of your career that you're currently at, that there's value in being able to seek other people's relationships and other connections with what you do. And hopefully there's some nuggets here that might be helpful for you as you pursue that. So we'll go ahead and make a pause here and open the floor if we have any questions.
Going once.
I was about to say, if there is no questions, maybe this could be a brief moment that for other people, if you have thought about some great advice that you didn't hear or that you have been told in your various levels, this would be a great time to share that, because we still have a variety of individuals in here, from students to from undergrad students up to a full professor. So that advice could carry for many, many years. So if there's no questions, if you have some advice to share, I think that would be very valuable.
Dr. Baker, I'm going to put you on the spot.
I said good job too soon before I got called on.
You did. And then I saw your name and I was thinking how incredible you are of a networker, and we're just missing out on your beautiful advice.
It's true.
Would you be willing to share anything that's been helpful for you?
Sure. I mean, I feel like everybody has had really great suggestions, and it's hard to think about pre-COVID and current COVID and post-COVID, what this will look like. But I think a lot of the things you said were spot on, just not being afraid to reach out to people. I think particularly those of us that are getting a little more years on us in the industry are happy to help, but we kind of don't always know ways to be helpful to those of you that are up and coming, because we're like, well, yeah, I mean, we have a network of people, but I think asking, reaching out again, and, you know, Courtney and I in our breakout session, we're just talking about the number of emails that we unfortunately ignore these days because there's just too many of them. So I think if you reach out to somebody and they don't respond, feel free to reach out again. It was likely not intentional. We're all just really busy and trying to make things happen. One thing that I've done that I didn't see other people mention is I did set up a Calendly that syncs to my calendar. So when people email me, it's there. And sometimes people do take me up on it and put appointments on my calendar that are kind of a fun surprise. But for me, that's been really helpful as far as a time management issue, because I don't have to say, well, I want to meet with Shannon, but it's going to take us 27 emails before we come up with a time to meet. I can just send you this link and you can sign up then. So I feel like that's all I really have. Y'all did a great job of getting a large scope of people that said wonderful things. I don't disagree with anything anybody said.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Baker.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Baker.
Is there any other pieces of advice that we would like to share?
I found that being able to get outside of what you're actually there for. So if you're there for a communications conference, that's obviously something you already have in common, but going outside of that, and you tend to find, oh, I know this person, or I know this person, and it becomes that you become more familiar to that person versus just being an academic contact. And then you become, you know, a little bit further into the circle of like personal contacts. And I feel like that's when things really start moving forward, is when you become a personal contact versus an academic or a job contact.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And especially whenever you've invested so much time into that group of whatever it is that you're going to, whenever you start to see some of your friends that are there, as well as some of your mentors and some of your professional contacts, I think that that's the strength of the benefit of a strong network. So thank you so much for that, Dr. Lawson. So we're right at some time here. So if just for the sake of being able to make some announcements, we'll go ahead and wrap up here and turn it over back to Dr. Telg. But Dr. Roberts and I are just very excited to be a part of this incredible community. And we thank you for investing in people like ourselves to be able to be successful and stand on the shoulders of giants. And we hope that there's a point, if we can ever help you on the other side of that too, that know that invitation is open. So we wish you all the best and hope that you have a wonderful rest of your Monday.
Great. Thank you both. Thank you so much. That was a great topic, even with the persons that you had, especially one that you had record a video for. I mean, notwithstanding, it was a great presentation. So I do appreciate you reaching out to me to be a part of your presentation already. So we do have a couple of minutes. If there's any announcements folks want to make or any updates, this is the time we usually try to do so. Anything? If not, we do have a presentation coming up on November the 15th. That is the third Monday, not the fourth Monday, because the fourth Monday is the week of Thanksgiving. So November the 15th, David Dorford from Texas Tech University will be talking about how to develop your research program. So hopefully those of you who have a research appointment, and even if you don't, about how to develop a research program in agricultural communications. So with that, hope to see you in about a month. Thank you all so much. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.